I'm very pleased and I feel very privileged to have this opportunity to spend some time with you tonight. Thank you so much, Indian Summer Festival, for the invitation. I want to thank all of our esteemed guests, which means each and every one of you. In the Caribbean storytelling tradition, when the teller is ready to tell and the listeners are ready to listen, the storyteller says, crick, and the audience, the guests say, all right, so let's do it again. Crick, crick, and just so the story begins, let me tell you about today's gathering of the Trickster Clan. All the way from the land of Brer Rabbit, we have Mr. Arthur Flowers, who will soon be festooned in flowers. In the language of flowers, the clematis is the symbol for mental beauty. I wonder if they might make an appearance somehow tonight. My father comes from the land where they tell Anansi stories. Here we're being welcomed into the territory of Raven. Raven also made way for the people who tell the Monkey King stories. We are in the company of tricksters tonight. We welcome all tricksters in the room. The theme for Indian Summer Festival, Tales of War and Peace, never seems to go out of relevance somehow. And I find it one of the things that impressed me amongst many things about Mr. Flowers' work is the work on Demoja Blues, where we're looking at, so Mr. Flowers is a veteran from the Vietnam War, which of course the Vietnamese call the American War. And in this collection, in this story, he talks about transforming notions of maleness and the guilt and horror of war. And I think this is such a beautiful and opportune time to look in further about what it means to be having a soldier who becomes an artist, who can talk about the big human conditions through his work as a novelist and an essayist and a performance poet coming straight out of Memphis, Tennessee, which some of you will already know, and really helping to direct young and emerging, or actually not always young and emerging. I didn't go to university till I was way into my 40s. So let's just say writers. With your work at the Creative Writing Department at Syracuse University, I really appreciate all the kinds of artists that take the special skill and time to share what they're learning. And this is really, I think, what Indian Summer is about as well. And what I'm hoping you'll experience tonight is what it feels like to live in a participatory culture, in a communal culture, in a culture where we not only receive culture, but we also create it together. And this is part of our invitation tonight, to do something together. And I suppose in the spirit of, let me say, I'm not sure how to say this word, maybe you can help me. Patua? Patua? Thank you. So when Manu Chitrakar and this tradition working with the Patua scroll and taking one tradition and marrying it to the tradition of Martin Luther King and seeing what happens when we take our ancient and modern selves together. And I think before we get into the participatory piece, I want us to sit and think what it is when we conjure, what our words conjure, what our images conjure, when we put our mind to taking that which we're dreaming of, whether it comes through a lecture, a speech, a painting, a music, something that you engineer, an exquisitely designed proposal that makes action happen. All of these things are the art of conjuring. And I thank you all for the efforts you do towards that. And, you know, as we gather in this city and after the 150th moment in Canadian political history, I think it's really beautiful when we think about reconciliation and Canadians are starting to acknowledge what it means to lose language, ceremony, and song. And I think most Canadians could acknowledge that that is more than a loss, it's a travesty. And I wonder when settler Canadians will also see we've also lost our songs and stories and ceremonies, sometimes more than other times. And what we have right now is the opportunity to build, to conjure the world we want to be in from this moment on. Imagine a culture and a future where people were singing together and telling stories together, and that was enough to be together, to sing and tell stories. Wow. Why don't we try? So we're going to sing a song. I will tell you the words. This is the song. I'm on the advisory board for which is a Squamish language and culture revitalization support organization supporting the culture and the flourishing of Squamish language and culture. And we did a gala, and it was called We Speak. And they said, oh, Vanessa, would you sing a song? Could you lead us a song? And I thought, oh, all the different songs. And then I went, hold on a minute. That title looks good to me. We Speak. I think there's something there. So I wrote a song for it, and I hope that you will enjoy singing it with me now. But first of all, I'm going to tell you the words. Then I will sing it for you. You'll hear one verse. Then I'll do call. Well, I will sing it once. And you'll echo back to me like the Pacific Coastal Mountain Range. I'm the lone yodeler. So I did mention my father was Trinidadian and my mother is from Vienna, Austria. So the yodeling aspect of the and we'll do that. So I will sing and you'll enjoy singing it back. First, we speak, letting the language find our lips. We speak, letting the language find our lips. We speak, blessing the air that we sip. We speak, blessing Now make a warm welcome to Mr. Arthur Flowers.
The bells are very dramatic when I'm walking up here. That was a hard act to follow. Thank you, that was moving. And that was some very good storytelling. I would like to, I'm nervous. I would like to thank the Indian Summer folk for inviting me. This is a brand new act. I used to do the basic thumb piano. But I decided recently, I went to Chennai for my second Tara books, Burr Rabbit Tales, and it's not out yet. It's a beautiful work. That's me, theoretically. And it's just beautiful work all through it. And we cut a CD for it with Indian musicians, Sarathe and Gandhara Vinay. And they had to carry me. You know, they carried me. Because I was there with my little 5 kalimba notes, dum, 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 and they were. And this instrument, it's about 4 years old. And when it came out, I was tempted. But you know, I'm in my 60s and I'm already feeling arthritic. I said, I don't have time to learn something new like that. But then, at the beginning of this year, I thought, if I had done that 4 years ago, you know, I'd be good now. And I didn't want to, like, 4 years from now, I'd be thinking, if I had done that 4 years ago, and if my hands get more arthritic, I'll pay that cost for music, you know? All right, an easy crowd. Lord Legba, open this gate. In the name of the conqueror, let this work be done. One of the things that Vanessa mentioned, I spent a year in Vietnam as a young man. And Vietnam blew my mind, blew my young mind. And what Vietnam made clear to me is that I was in the middle of history. And I'd always thought of history as of the places, of the times, of the people. But Vietnam made it clear to me that history is always now. That we, in our every thought, action, and deed, we shape the future. And I have tried since to be conscious of my legacy. And I was there the night that Martin Luther died. Well, not that died, that he spoke at the temple. And I appreciate you asking me here to testify. I'd like to thank the consulate for helping me get here. Thank you so much for your vote of confidence. They've been trying to talk me out of the nervous. I once read that Harry Belafonte still gets nervous. I said, if it's good enough for Harry Belafonte, it's good enough. Oh, I am flowers of the Delta Clan, flowers in the line of O'Killens. That's a griotic formula. I come out of the griotic school of African American literature. I'm primarily a novelist, but we feel that we are heirs to two literary traditions, the Western written tradition and the African oral, and try in the fusion to take them both to higher ground. And part of the griotic tradition is to identify who you are and who you were trained by. I was trained by Baba John Killens, the great griot master of Brooklyn. Oh, I am flowers of the Delta Clan, flowers in the line of O'Killens. Oh, I am hoodoo. I am griot. I am a man of power. My words, true words, my story, true story, my lies, they are true lies. I am myth maker. And I'd like to thank you for asking me here today. Because when my people gather together like this, in peace and love and harmony, then that place, that gathering place, this place, it is holy ground. Holy ground. Get out of my act, kid. I was just kidding. Leave him. I wasn't going to share my billing. Oh, he made me, I'm not nervous anymore. Bring him back. And it is altogether fitting that we ask Martin Luther King to be with us this evening, to come and help us celebrate this thing we do. I'm going to, pardon my quiet, I'm going to do two pieces. I'll do a piece on Martin Luther King from the Promised Land, and and a Brer Rabbit piece. If I had been thinking, I would have brought my scroll. Because Gita Wolf, after my Promised Land piece came out, basically the way that piece came about is at Jaipur. She came up, she said, would you like to do a collaboration with an Indian patua artist? I said, yes. what's a patua artist? And she explained that they are itinerant storytellers and that they use the scrolls to tell the stories. And I was like, oh, yeah. And so Manu and I, we worked out the collaboration, and Manu had never heard of Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement. And they, you know, explained it to him, and he felt it. He felt the connection with the struggle. And so we worked back and forth, and we had some cultural glitches. If you were to see the book, his slave ships look like Viking ships to me. And the slaves are rowing. But you can feel it, you know, you can feel it. And his idea of the Underground Railroad was a train with like the big handlebar mustaches. It's beautiful. And there was, you know, so a lot of the cultural glitches, we just left them. And in the process of working back and forth, and like at first he fell in love with the idea of the Ku Klux Klan. He had like 20 pictures of the Ku Klux. I said, Manu, that's too much Ku Klux Klan. I can't have that much Ku Klux Klan in my work, man. And so, you know, he cut some of them out. My partner is back. And, but in the process, he became so fascinated with Martin Luther King that now Martin Luther King and the struggle has become a patua artist trope. That many of them, because Manu is a master. To understand Martin Luther King, at least the Martin Luther I know, you have to understand the world that I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. What I like about this instrument, what I'm trying to do, is trance you out. It's a meditative device as far as I'm concerned. I remember once I was walking down all these diversions. I never know what I'm gonna do when I get up here. But I remember I was walking down the street in Harlem once, and there was this theater group, the National Black Theater, Bob Rantier's group, and they were kind of, you know, folk, they were, I can say, they were a little cultish. Sorry. And so I was kind of dismissive of that, you know, because I thought I considered myself a player, you know, and I'm like tough, you know. Even though I walked by there one time, and this guy, so they wore white all the time, you know, white outfits all the time. And I was walking down the street one day, and I saw this guy. He was standing there. He had this white outfit on, you know, and I call myself a mystic, you know. And so I was like, show off, you know, and being dismissive. But then he raised his hand up in the air, and a bird came out the air and landed on. I was like, excuse me. I had to bow. So anyway, I was walking down the street, and I saw they had a loft, second floor loft, and on 125th Street. And I saw a lot of people going up the loft, and, you know, I said, something happening, you know. I went on up the loft with them, and they were having a theater experience where everybody was, hello. Everybody was milling around, and they would like, show love to your fellow human beings. Love everybody, you know, love and hug and love. And I was like, I'm not hugging anybody, you know. But before it was over, you know, I'm Arthur Flowers, who are you? You know, and I was loving it and just loving everybody and peace and love with the world and everything. And when it was over, I walked down the street, came out on the street, and it was like reality hit me in the face. I was like, what the was that? All of a sudden I was out of it. But when I'm performing, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to, for the time that we are together, we're a community. And I would like to take us all to higher ground. That was a major experience for me. So at some point, we're going to talk about trouble. Because everybody knows trouble into each life. There must be trouble. And into each life, there's got to be rain. And so I'm going to try to wash your troubles away. For the time that you're here this evening, I want you to check your troubles at the door. Let me tell you about the world I grew up in, the world that Martin Luther King destroyed. I grew up in the pre-apartheid South. We had to drink from the colored water fountain. We had to sit at the back of the bus. Yes or no, sir. It was better than slavery. It was a soul-demeaning existence. And Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement pulled us out of that. It was Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement that said you can't be rode unless you bend your back. And at the time, to resist it, put life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness the Civil War may have delivered us from slavery, but it was Martin Luther King that set us free. And I was a young militant at the time, and I dismissed Martin. We thought he was an old Tom. This was the world that Martin was born into. This was the call that he answered. Those were some trying times. Sometimes you wonder if it was ever this bad. You look at the condition of the world today. And sometimes it's hard not to despair. But you must understand, struggle has always been epic, and we have always overcome. When they chose Martin to be the face of the Montgomery boycott, he was not known. They chose him because he didn't have factions. Whereas all the rest of the leaders, he had just moved to Montgomery and he didn't have followership. So they thought he could be controlled until he gave his first sermon for the movement, and they realized they had a Mac on their hands. The Great Awakening. Those early years were good years. The struggle took on new meaning and new life. The Montgomery Bus Boycott, where blacks walked carpool. And there was that one time that Martin saw this elder walking down the way, and he said, "Are you tired?" And she said, "My feet are tired, but my soul is rested." She said, "I'm gonna keep on. I'm gonna keep on keeping on." The Montgomery Bus Boycott, the marching children of Birmingham, singing, "I shall not be moved, I shall not be moved, just like a tree that's standing by the water, I shall not be moved." The March on Washington, I have a dream. Nobel Prize. I enjoyed that, whatever that was. No. I was just trying to see if I was going to get the reverb again. Let me focus. But you know, it's not the good times that define us. It's the hard times. And it wasn't all good. We lost a lot of people. We lost a lot of people. The 4 babies of Birmingham, Medgar, Schwerner, Goodman, and Cheney, who fell, Martin, Malcolm. By the time that Martin made his way to Memphis, he was troubled in mind. He was troubled in mind. It had gone bad on him. He got ran out of Chicago. Black woman put a pair of scissors in his chest. He had come out against the Vietnam War, and he lost a lot of support. Because at the time, everybody, including the Democrats that he depended on, LBJ, when he came out, he said, "I got to say Vietnam is wrong." And then when he equated the black struggle with the struggle for human dignity and said, I got to speak, I can't just speak for black people, I got to speak for everybody. I can't just save black people, got to save them all. And he came up with the Poor People's March. And folk told him, "Man, you need to talk about what you know." But Martin would not be restricted and constrained. But by the time, and his nonviolence had been challenged by Malcolm and the riots and the Panthers and folk like me. I was part of the black militants that disrupted the first march in Memphis and forced him to come back. That march was the only time that somebody died during Malcolm Martin's. So he came back to Memphis. and he had trouble in mind. Let me tell you about trouble. Now, I'm gonna tell you, in the old days, Brother Alligator had that smooth and pretty skin. Thought he was better than everybody else. And then one day, Brer Rabbit come hopping down the trail. He said, "Good morning, Brer Alligator." Brer Alligator act like he don't see Brer Rabbit. He raises his long nose in the air. Now everybody knows Brer Rabbit is a sensitive man. And it don't do to this Brer Rabbit. So the next day, Brer Rabbit come hopping down the trail. He's looking at his watch. He talking about I'm late. I'm really late. Now everybody knows you don't ask no rabbit talking about they late, what they late for, unless you ready to go through the looking glass. But Brer Alligator's a curious man. He said, "Where to, Brer Rabbit?" Brer Rabbit said, "I'm going to meet trouble." He said, "Surely you know trouble." Brer Alligator said, "No, I don't believe I know him. Sounds like somebody I need to know." Brer Rabbit, he said, "You mind if I tag along?" Brer Rabbit said, "Sure, bring the family." Whoo, such a mean rabbit. So the rabbit takes him down by the riverside. That big field down by the riverside. He said, "Y'all wait right here. I'm going to get trouble. I'm going to get trouble." And he goes over to the other side of the field. He starts a great big fire. And after a while, you can see that fire. You can hear that snapping and that crackling. And you can see those red, yellow, and orange leaping flames. Now riddle me this. Sometimes you can see trouble coming miles down the road. But sometimes trouble is wrapped up in that pretty red, yellow, and orange packaging. Instead of getting out the way, you be talking about my trouble, you sure look good. Trouble, you sure look good. I'm gonna get me some of that trouble. Every once in a while I get a little, those sound people are doing something. And so, instead of getting out the way, they're waiting on trouble. And after a while, trouble comes up on them. Sister Alligator, she raised her long nose up in the air. She said, "I think I smell trouble." But they don't move because they're waiting on trouble. And after a while, that fire's got them surrounded. And one of the little alligator children said, "I think I feel trouble deep down in my soul. I feel trouble all over my skin, and I believe we need to move." And they're right next to the water. They are right next to the water. But to get to the water, They must go through the fire. They got to go through the fire. So the alligator family, they scoot through the fire and into the water. And they get away. But they get all scorched up. And that's why to this day, if you see bro alligator, he gonna have a wrinkled up skin. And if you see sister alligator, she ain't gonna be too far from the water. She ain't gonna be too far. She ain't gonna be too far from the water. And if you speak to the alligator children, they gonna tell you, don't go looking for trouble. Not unless trouble comes looking for you. Now into each life, oh, into each life, there's got to be trouble. And into each life, there's got to be rain. There's got to be rain. But you know, God don't give you no burden that you can't carry. And it is only through adversity that you will ever know your true strength. So when the hard times come, and they always do, I want you to hold on. Hold on. You got to be strong. Because you fight the battles, friend, nobody else could win. You fight the battles, friend, nobody else could win. So the next time that you find yourself in trouble, I want you to remember what the old blues doctor said. Every goodbye, you ain't gone, and 'cause you're sick, it don't mean you're dead. Lord knows trouble don't last always. Oh, trouble don't last always. Now there are those that say that Martin Luther knew he was going to die, that the prophet saw the way. I was there the night at the temple. It was a stormy night and he almost didn't come. Sent Ralph Abernathy in his place because he was tired. He was weary in his soul. But when Ralph got to the temple, he saw almost all of Black Memphis waiting. He said, Martin, they're waiting. So Martin came. And he said, we got some difficult days ahead. But it doesn't matter with me now. I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I don't care about that now. He said, I've been to the mountaintop and I've looked over. And I've seen the promised land. And I may not get there with you, but I want you to know that we as a people, we gonna get to the promised land. I'm on a college campus. Which is where I am most of my time, my life. And for any students, for the young, I'd like to say in the name of Martin Luther, I envy you. I've been a child of struggle now all my life. And I'm kind of at the end of my journey. Not at the end, but got a short shelf life. But you're just getting started. And I trust you to make a better way. I trust you to make a better world. I know that you understand that we who have been blessed, we have responsibilities that come with this blessing to help those who have not the resources. We're all in this together. I know you're gonna do me proud. You have no idea how much I love and need you. How much we all do. You are the future that we have dreamed. I remember a buddy of mine, Sekou Sundiata, he once said that we are what the slaves dreamed when they had a little time to get into themselves and dream of the future that could be. And you're our future. And when you come, you come to the crossroads, I want you to always strive to be greater than you are. I want you to take the high road. I hope that you leave here this evening refreshed and regenerated in the struggle that is life, confident in the victory of all that is good. Chanel. Where's Chanel? Oh, is that my time count? 15 minutes. Okay. I was about to go into closure. I'm going to tell one more quick story, because I got 15 minutes. Let me tell this right quick. This is one of my favorites because it's my last novel. It's a chapter from my novel. It's a love story. 15 minutes, huh? 14. Love story, real quick. I'm going to tell you about love. Tell you about how Lucas Bodine and Melvira Dupree found love. That to die for a love, when you wake up in the morning, thanking God that I'm with you. Now, few folk find the good thing, it's probably best that way, 13. Probably best that way, because when you do find the good thing, my friend, is strictly do or die, when you got to have it. My boy Bodine was a silver-tongued blues man. He had left a lot of good women grieving, but this one touched him somewhere deep. Boy didn't know what he was stepping into when he tilted his Stetson just so and crossed the path. And we're talking about Mississippi Delta, about 1920. He said, "How do, ma'am? I'm Lucas Bodine. Are you interested?" She looked at him with massive brown galaxies of eyes that saw a mite more than he was comfortable showing. He said, "I'm a blues man out of Memphis, Tennessee, but I come to town with the traveling medicine show." He paused poised for an opening. She said, "Melvira Dupree, conjure woman." He said, "Conjure woman? You mean like hoodoo, voodoo, magic, and all that?" He said, "I don't know if I'm ready for all that," but he looked her over again. He liked what he saw. He said, "Well, I declare, Miss Dupree, you ain't like no conjure woman I ever seen." She said, "Is that so, blues man? How many conjure women have you seen?" He said, "I just told you, I'm a well-traveled man. I've been to New York City, Paris, France, Timbuktu, and Vancouver." He said, "I warn you up front, I ain't never tossed my shoes under no woman's bed for long. When the blues call, I'm liable to answer." Woo! Boy talking real big trash, but she looked him over again with those funny eyes of hers. She could see that he would be, shall we say, a troublesome man. But something about him spoke to her in that special way. She didn't look any further, because between men and women, a degree of mystery is often appropriate. He said, "I like your style, really, truly I do." He said, "I come to claim you, and if you really conjure, you know I'm talking true." She said, "I like your style too, blues man." Her throaty voice was a tickle, a challenge that bewitched him. He preened under her obvious approval like a bantam rooster, and he commenced to sing himself a brand new blues. He said, "I come such a long, long way in my day to get to where I am. And the one thing I've learned is a good woman must be earned." He said, "I want to be your man, a man enough to keep you warm. Now my baby moves me, she burns me with the sacred fire of mystic love, eternal and unyielding and always fierce. My baby got that stangery loving, warm and sweet and tender to the taste. I was born to love her, I was born to be her man. Because she shaped to my taste in a woman. She takes my breath away, a nascent sack. She wears round the waist, the sweet stangery glory that captured me, owns me, satisfies me, rides me, makes me feel the magic, mystery, and the power of woman. Revelations 5 makes me stand upright, makes my nature rise and testify. Ain't God good? Ain't God good? He said, "My baby moves me." Now, at the Sweetwater General Store, she rested her hand lightly on his arm. She said, "I thank you for your company, Mr. Bodine. You're kind of cute." He said, "I'm a lot more than cute, as you shall see when I come courting." He said, "I ain't gonna pester you too much, and I just enough to put me on your mind some." She said, "You don't know you want to be on my mind." He said, "Oh, yes, I do. What you gonna do? Who do a man the blues already claim? He said, I'll be seeing you around, Miss Elvira Dupree. Now, it would be safe to say that the good colored folks, what time do I have there? I like that, man. Now, it would be safe to say that the good colored folks of Sweetwater, Arkansas were scandalized and mystified when their conjure woman took up with that blues singer. When he moved into her little place out there on Sweetwater Creek, a lot of the local lads were understandably upset with him. They wouldn't have minded a chance with that Fox Dupree, but she was known to have a temper, and any old fool know that courting a conjure woman with a temper, that's a chance to think. Any day now, folks expect to see that boy hopping around like a toad frog, wiggling on his belly like a snake. But whatever he was doing it right. Elvira Dupree changed up on him, walk around town smiling, nodding good morning at people just like a regular neighbor. But it was when she started hanging out at the local juke joint where Lucas got a job barrel housing every Friday night that folks really commenced to comment. Girls start flouncing that big impressive booty, having herself just much too good of a time for the Puritans from the old school who couldn't quite recall a conjure woman quite like this one. But it was when she started hanging out down at the local juke joint where Lucas got a job barrel housing every Friday and Saturday night that folks really commenced to commenting. Those Sweetwater elders, you know, those grandmamas and great-grandmamas, seen everything at least twice. They poke each other in the ribs when they saw her walking around town glowing because they knew a recently satisfied woman when they saw one. After all, a good man is still hard to find, I'm told. And even conjures appreciate that good loving. Don't we all appreciate good loving? And that boy Bodine, he just as snug as a hog in fresh summer mud. Walk around town with his you like that line? Walk around town with his thumbs hooked in those red suspenders, grinning proud as a brand new fool. You could tell that boy loved himself some Elvira Dupree. A whole lot of Sweetwater women liked the way that boy's lean brown fingers would caress music out those cold piano keys. And wonder what did he do with a woman's warm body? But he went home to Elvira Dupree each and every night. Took his money home each and every week too, like a natural man. And didn't ever raise his hand up against her. They did fuss a lot. You know, every time he said, but that's how some folks show affection. And even, of course, now what folks saw from those wraparound porches, it wasn't the whole story. Any good story is always at least 3 or 4 stories deep, and since this is a good story, you like that line? And since this is a good story, I expect you to pay close attention to the weave of it. Lucas Bodine and Elvira Dupree couldn't tell you the whole story. But what they did come to understand, deep down in once starved and lonely souls, is when you find yourself some good loving, some real good loving, when you find love in your life, if you got any sense at all, hold on to it. Hold on to love. Hold on to love. Now may your days be full of passion, and may your lives be full of grace, and may your works serve many generations. Oh, may God's blessings, oh, may God's blessings be on us all. God's blessings on us all. Thank you. Thank you. Another 2 hours? Thank you very much. You've been a great audience. Thank you. Thank you.
Are the flowers? Thank you. Thank you for just being.